again, there isn't such a thing as just, oh, it's in neutral, we're good. Like, if that's your mentality, more than likely,
Yep.
it's probably starting to drift away.
When you draw it out and you start seeing it, you start seeing, oh my gosh, like this is repeated over and over again.
Oh, really? Are you sure about that?
Well,
And
I
you're
was like, well,
it
you
was
don't
just
know
like,
how big my family is.
Like, I don't know how you are able to get sass through a text message.
It's called personality.
Sure.
Okay.
You're my sky, you're my blue. I'll be sticking with you.
And we're back.
And we're back.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Good Love Co podcast. I am your host, Paulina.
And I am your other host, Josh.
And today we're so excited about what we're going to be touching on. But before we get into it.
Yeah, a little housekeeping.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We just want to say thank you so much to everybody who has liked, shared, everybody who's commented. We got a whole bunch of comments, people reaching out just like in text messages and like just letting us know, hey, this is really great or whatever the case might be. And, you know, you've really encouraged me with stuff concerning marriage or relationship.
Yeah.
And that is genuinely so encouraging for us. And so, yeah, that's been a really cool thing that's been happening lately.
Yeah. So thank you for tuning in and thank you for coming back.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're talking about something that we hear all the time. We hear about this thing called cycles. I mentioned it in the first reel that we did. And it's just like, hey, we want you to have the ability to choose. Let's not continue to replicate everything that we've seen, right? And so with that, something that's so interesting is that a post that I've seen, probably because I've been thinking about this topic, but from Christians and non-Christians, is this idea of breaking generational curses. Have you seen any of that at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I grew up in a charismatic type church. So generational curses, all that stuff.
Renouncing to everything.
Very well known.
Yeah.
I grew up with that as a known thing. And yeah, you definitely see lots of posts about it. And it can be really kind of weird a little bit. What is all of that about?
Yeah.
But I think that it could be a little bit more simple than what sometimes we hear.
I agree with you. So that's what we're going to be touching on today. And I mean, in the therapy world, we do see the concept of generational curses in the sense of, again, stopping those cycles, right? Starting something new in your own family system, not continuing to do what perhaps you saw in your family of origin that did not serve you, right? So, baby, let's get into it.
Yeah. So I guess like a cycle, just to get very simple, how would you define that? Like, what do you mean by that?
It's so hard to define the simplest things. You know what I mean? So let's look it up. What is a cycle?
Look up what a cycle is. I'm going to guess that a cycle
is
a recurring pattern that happens over similar, like during periods of time. And it just keeps repeating itself.
It's a series of events that are regularly repeated in the same order. I would have said
all right, that's pretty close.
In at least 5 paragraphs. So that's a good place to start. So it's something that is repeated in the same sequence of events over and over. And it's so interesting because I feel like growing up, for example, my mom never kept like Twinkies or like just those delicious
the nasty junk food
in the pantry.
The stuff that RFK's banning all
I
of
wanted
it
so badly. And I remember thinking to myself, when I have my own house, when I have my own home, when I'm a grown up, I'm going to have Twinkies and cookies and all the things.
You actually thought that?
I actually thought that because we didn't have any of those goodies and I really wanted them. And now I'm so thankful that we didn't have them.
You're repeating a good cycle.
I am repeating a good cycle. We don't keep most of those things at home.
No, we don't have any of those junk food snacks.
But I'm curious for you and for our listeners, like, can you think of something that as a child you thought, when I grow up, I'm not going to do that thing that mom does or that dad does?
Yeah. Oh, I have one right away.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so like my mom is one of the cleanest house persons that you could possibly find. Just the house would be spotless, like at all times. And she would have us kids we all split the chores and we all had to do our things.
Yeah.
And I just remember like vacuuming the floors or having to clean the bathroom or whatever that is. And like I actually remember thinking like, I'm not going to do this every single time. I'm not going to be, having to do this all the time and and you know what?
That's exactly what you do, baby.
And would you know?
That is
I literally
so
do
funny.
it.
Literally, I'm like, babe. I mean, we don't. It's just you and I, and you're like, nope. Let me get my vacuum in.
I have to. If not, it's just something in me is just like I can't
That's
handle it.
so
I love
funny.
to have a nice in order house, even if nobody's ever gonna see it that day or whatever. It's just like for me, I have to do it. I think that was built into me by my mom for sure.
I'm thankful for it. I am thankful for my mother
you're
who
thankful for it.
raised
All right.
you
Okay.
to just be such a tidy, organized, clean man. I will take it any day.
All right.
And so actually we just spoke about like 2 generational cycles that like actually we want to probably keep those going.
Yes, I would
But
agree.
as we think about kind of those negative things, I have a few that come to mind that as a little girl, maybe in distress or confusion or whatever the case is, or because it just wasn't a good thing, that I thought to myself, I'm not going to do that, right?
Yeah.
And yet oftentimes those are the very things that we do, right? So we just gave some positive examples, but it's the same thing that we do with the negative things.
Sure.
Right. And so you said something earlier that I'd love for you to repeat as we were kind of talking through this topic about generational curses.
Well, generational curses, like when you hear the word curse, it kind of makes it like this mystical, weird Harry Potter, like the cursed child situation. And now you got to go defeat Lord, we don't say his name. Sorry. But like you have to go defeat you have to go do that. And it's like this huge kind of big thing. And it kind of makes it so much bigger than what it is.
Yeah.
Though there could be some generational curse type things that could be spiritual, right? Like the Bible's very clear. We fight against principalities and the spiritual warfare. We get that. But I think there's sometimes that we over spiritualize it. And something that, we call a generational curse is really just a sin habit that has been built up over time. And you have seen that sin habit over and over and over again through maybe your grandfather to your father, now to you start seeing that maybe to your uncles. And it's just something that you have grown up seeing.
Yeah.
So in a way, yes, it's a curse because it's like you're seeing this bad habit play out over and over again, but it's not like you were marked by a wizard wand,
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, now we have no hope. It's really something of, it's a previous life that we are trying to leave and that you saw this back there and we're trying to get rid of that. So there's a hope.
Yeah. And
There's
I
a
mean,
hope to that.
to add to that about generational curses is, for example, if you saw, let's say, a parent be in distress and then cope with that by, for example, starting to drink and getting drunk, that is a curse within itself. Like that the coping skill that was passed on to you, that you learned, that you observed, isn't something that's going to serve you, right? In the life that you're building, right? And so I think that, to your point, and I love that you said that, because do we believe in a spiritual realm? Absolutely.
Yeah.
We know that, right?
That's biblical.
But again, there are some times where it really is, it's not simple, it's not easy, but I think it actually empowers us to understand, okay, yes, in Christ we're set free, and it's not this like ethereal thing that like is out there and I have to like find out and renounce every single thing that my parents and grandparents and great-great-grandparents did. Like, well,
it puts a lot of pressure on you.
So much.
If it's all up to you to try to break all the generational curses.
Exactly.
And you have to just like think of every single thing and you better renounce all of it. And if you don't, you're going to be oppressed and and it's like, I don't know. I'm not claiming to know all of it, but that one seems like that puts a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah.
And it's not really putting the load onto Jesus who died for our sins and actually transformed us from the inside out. We are a new creation.
In him, yeah.
I do agree that sometimes we over spiritualize it, and that sometimes we just need to take accountability and realize there's a cycle playing out here, and we need to just look at that, realize what's happening, and then possibly do something about it.
Yeah. So today, in a very practical sense, we want to talk about recognizing those patterns, pausing. Like, I think we live in such a go, go, go world that we don't stop to just reflect. What are the tendencies? What are the automatic processes that are set up? And so that's what today is all about. We're going to get into it.
I like that.
Let's do it.
That sounds good.
So I think a great example for us to conceptualize our automatic versus manual processes is the genetic testing that I just did.
Yeah. You got genetically tested.
I just got genetically tested.
Oh boy.
And they take just your saliva.
Yeah.
And they're able to find all these things in your DNA that you have a predisposition for, right?
Right. And so it's like, this is permanent. You just take this test one time.
Yeah.
For the rest of your life, because that doesn't change.
Yeah. So it'll tell you like, hey, you are more likely to be vitamin D deficient. That is just something in my genes. And so I need to be aware of that. It's helpful to be aware of that because, hey, let me go ahead and supplement my vitamin D. Let me go ahead and prioritize getting some sun, right? Compared to somebody who maybe doesn't have that genetic predisposition.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right? So in that same way, we have our predispositions, or what we're going to refer to as our automatic processes, our automatic thinking.
That's a great way to put it.
That comes from our family of origin. That comes from what we saw growing up, the spoken and the unspoken rules. And so can you tell us maybe what was some automatic thinking, an automatic process for you coming into relationship with me?
Well, so I guess one that's pretty obvious for me is the idea of avoiding conflict. And so it's a really funny one because you have to understand, like, my dad comes from an ex-Amish family.
Yep.
So if you didn't know,
wait.
What?
I'm Dominican and I have lots of cousins. Like each of my parents has like 10 siblings.
No, you have a big family.
I have a big family.
You do.
So that's just like always been something about me. Like, oh, I have so many cousins.
Yeah, you thought you had a big family.
And then you were like, but without even knowing how many cousins I had.
Well, we were texting when we were first starting in the dating process and getting to know each other. You said, oh, I have a big family. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So do I. Not like immediate family. I have just a first, only a few first cousins and stuff. But when you look at my family, it's massive.
Massive.
Because it comes from an ex-Amish side, from my dad's side. And so we're talking like
hundreds and hundreds of second cousins.
So literally we were texting and I was just like, I'm pretty sure that my family's bigger. And you were like, oh, really? Are you sure about that?
Well, I was like, well, you don't know how big my family is.
Like, I don't know how you are able to get sass through a text message.
It's called personality.
Sure.
Okay.
So, but the fact is like, I was, oh, well, no, my family's bigger. No, it's not.
I did not do all that. I was like,
it was, you were just,
because you didn't even know how many cousins I had.
I mean, you were just kind of like, yeah, I have a big family, blah, blah, blah. And all I had to say, I wrote one response and I just said, Amish.
Well, I was getting ready to type out like, my dad has this many siblings, my mom, and you literally just wrote Amish.
I wrote one word, Amish, and then you were like, oh. Okay.
You win.
Yeah, you're right.
I've seen the Amish in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
So you had a little bit of an idea. But the thing is that you then, later on, after we got married, maybe like a year or two after that, you actually went to a family reunion.
I did.
And I wasn't lying.
You were not lying.
That was just one part of the Amish side of the family too.
Make the best pies ever.
That's right.
Listen.
It's good pies.
Amish pie is chef's kiss.
Okay, so all that to say, in the Amish community, they're lovely people. wonderful. You know, half my family is that way, or was that way, and has come down from that line.
Right.
One thing in the Amish community is that everybody tries to keep the peace. Like that is like a thing. You know, you don't want to stir it up. You don't want to like cause anything that would disturb the peace. So I'm very much about like peacemaking and stuff. And that goes like deep into some religious beliefs. Like they don't fight in wars. They don't do anything like that because of religious beliefs and disagreements with that.
Like even if somebody comes and like hits you, they will not hit back. Like they will just give the other cheek. Like they take that
and
very literally.
And I would imagine that there are some Amish that will. So don't go like test it.
Please don't go test it. Let them live in peace.
Don't go punch an Amish or something.
Lord.
They're very strong people too. They build
are.
houses.
Have
and
you
barns
seen
and
them
everything.
build barns
Yeah,
and
they know what they're doing.
It's amazing.
Don't be out here testing the Amish.
But that's the thing. It's not because they're not strong or capable.
No, they're super capable.
It's a decision that they make to keep the peace.
So it's very much of a like. Sometimes they won't even like, even if they were done wrong, they won't pursue legal action. There's that type of a culture and mentality, and so imagine that from that side of the family. Now you go to my mom's side of the family. She's Costa Rican.
Yep.
And one of the most famous things about Costa Ricans is that they don't have a standing army, right? They take all the money that would go towards an army and they put that towards their people with education, their schools, and like helping people, right? So just right off the bat, I grew up with very much like do not stir anything up, keep the peace. Like that has just been passed down to me. And that's what I've always seen. So even with conflicts and stuff with family or whoever, it was very much the conflicts would happen. There would be conflict. There's always conflict, but the conflict would happen behind closed doors to not bring it out into the public. So I grew up. And so the cycle that I learned was that I wouldn't bring conflict into our marriage. I just try to keep the peace. I don't try to stir the turd or whatever it might be. So for example, just like a very, clear example is that if we are in a disagreement or if we are unhappy, that means that we're arguing. That means that like I'm mad. And I would be, is that more or less what it is? Like,
no, that's perfect.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be so clear about like I'm angry right now.
You didn't use the word anger until like 2 days ago, not literally, but you just would say I'm just not happy about that, or I'm just
where it was really I was mad about it.
I'm mad, like,
and I was actually angry about that. And like last episode, like I just didn't know what emotions and stuff and how to handle that. But I actually started to learn what that is, and that it's okay to be mad. It's okay to be angry. Yeah. It's what we do in that anger and being mad that matters.
Yep.
But the anger and that doesn't mean that it's bad. And so what that would tend to be is like, keep the peace, keep the peace. You do something that really annoyed me or made me mad.
Yep.
And I would just kind of brush over it.
And let me like stuff it down.
Keep just stuffing it down and just keep it pushing.
Which, I mean, what happens if that's just kept there?
I mean, that's like, you build that up over time. Like you are just building resentment and anger and all this like pent up, whatever that is. And if you don't actually like emotionally start talking about it and get it out there, like you're gonna have health issues. I think like that'll cause lots of problems because it'll just generate stress in your life where it's so easy to just get rid of.
Yeah.
So literally, what would happen is you would, because you're a lot more, you're a lot better with conflict than I am, so
for better and for worse. Yes.
You are more open about that. You will say, what you feel and what that, if you're actually frustrated about something. But then when you unlock that, that's when I would have my list of things that I would just dump onto you.
I'm like, hold up, sir. Yeah, I'm talking about this one instance.
I know.
This is my moment. And now you've come and just...
And now I'm just like, saying all the things that have bothered me and all the different things, which is so unfair to you. But it's And again, it's not like that's what my parents or anybody taught me. It's
No.
just what I have seen, like just the cycles.
It's the unspoken rules, right? That you saw.
Exactly.
And so sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it is spoken, but whatever the case is, that was the message that you received. And it was definitely one of those automatic processes
Right.
that then was starting to play out in our marriage.
Exactly. Until it was found out.
Until it was...
Thank God. Until it
Yeah.
wasn't you that found that out. Actually,
No.
I found that out in therapy.
Yep.
So that was really good. So
Shout out to your therapist.
shout out therapy. My wife's a therapist.
So this is sponsored by...
Yeah. There's no sponsorships yet. Stop.
I'm declaring it.
Yeah, okay.
But babe,
Let's do
that's
it.
so good. And I mean, I just pausing to think about that. If that had played out in our marriage for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I mean,
How long?
what would that have been like?
Well, you see that all the time with marriages and how, somebody or both are just holding all that stuff in
Yeah.
and not dealing with it. It's going to come out at some point. It's going to fuel something because you got to
Yeah.
cope with it in some way. Like it doesn't just stay there.
Exactly.
And so whether that's then you like are just so mad and you start lashing out at your wife, or you just start looking elsewhere to somebody because you just have grown so distasteful towards somebody that you're just
Yeah.
like, I don't like them anymore because I've just built this up and I'm not dealing with it.
And even that, just like the friendship loss, man, I don't even care to be with you. Like,
I mean, I can't imagine
because I have all this stuff built up that I've never gotten out. I mean, I'm just so thankful that that's no longer one of the automatic processes.
Well, it's caught early.
Yeah.
Which is exactly why we're doing this podcast and who we are doing it for. We want those early marriages.
Yep.
We want people who may not even have been married yet or are not married yet and are thinking about it or wanting to get married or are just in the early stages of their marriage. Like, let's
recognize
catch
it.
these
Yeah.
cycles early so that way you have a strong foundation down the line.
And it's not something that you're getting entrenched in. So that didn't even become like a dynamic in our relationship because it was dealt
stopped-
with
Yeah, it was stopped right away.
way early. That's so good, baby. Thank you for sharing that. And as we were kind of talking, I think one of the automatic thoughts and processes that I brought into our marriage was, I can do it alone. I don't need you. And I think part of that came from just our culture, right? In general, growing up in New York is going to do a little bit of that to you. And I think part of it is also just the women in my family oftentimes had to rely on themselves, right? Whether it was because their husband wasn't there because of whatever reason, or even like my grandpa, who I'm named after, who passed away early. He was an incredible man. And my grandmother, until the day that she died, she wore her wedding ring. And
Never got remarried.
never remarried, I think was in love with him until the day that she passed away. And yet for her, she also had to become self-reliant because he had passed away. It was untimely. She was left with all of their children to raise, 10 of them on her own.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of an unspoken...
This is your grandma on your father's side.
On my father's side, yep.
What's her name again?
Thelma.
All right. We got to make sure. that we
You
shout
know her
out.
name, though.
I know. I wanted you to say
Oh,
it.
okay. So with that said, I think that was a message that I had within me was, I can do it on my own. I don't need you. And I remember even in dating, as I was falling in love with you, I would do these check-ins with myself. And even with you, I would say like,
Oh, yeah.
how would I phrase that again? Do you remember?
Oh, man. It was the worst.
I would be like, if you left my life today, I would be fine. Something crazy like that.
You would routinely say little things like that where it would just be like, like I'm in a place that if this didn't work out, I'd be totally fine. And you would just say these kind of reassuring things to yourself.
It was crazy that I said that out loud.
I'm just like, okay,
Oh my God.
and at that time we're doing long distance. So I'm like, I don't know if
Yeah.
she's still in this or not. Like, I have no clue. I hope. Like,
And I was protecting myself like,
yeah.
wait, hold up. I'm getting to a point where I feel this interdependence growing where actually I would be really hurt if he wasn't there.
And you were trying to protect yourself. It would
actually be heartbreaking.
Yeah.
If he was no longer in my life, right? And so I protected myself as much as I could. And it actually brought some ugly things into our relationship that thankfully were dealt with. But I think that was an automatic thought that came in. And again, I think of that long term. Imagine a wife that's like constantly reminding you that she doesn't need you.
Like
that she can do it on her own.
Ultra independent, like I don't need you. I would be okay if you weren't here.
Like how
but
terrible.
I choose to be with you, and it's not like that would be kind of that would be awful.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, yes. And you always remind me of this. Jesus is our provider, and he is the one, and he is our king, of course. But to be loved and to have a person that depends on you and that says, baby, I want you and I depend on you. I think that's important. That's an important thing to have, especially as a man. And so again, I'm thankful that that the Lord illuminated that and that I didn't stay in that self-sabotaging of pushing you away.
Yeah.
To make sure
thank
that
God.
if you were gone for whatever reason, that I would be fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And imagine if you kept that going in 20 years of that, instead of it being caught early and thank you, Jesus, that it was, and that's been dealt with. Imagine 20 years of that, like how much of a problem that would be then, and letting that just kind of like fester and grow, and what other beliefs that would then create. Like that would just be awful.
Yeah. So I think with that, we're always going to be talking again about cycles. It'll be something that we go back to
foundational
often.
Yeah.
Which is why we kind of wanted to talk about that this week. And something that is so interesting, one of my favorite things I learned in grad school is this thing called a genogram. And I think I've shown you one before that I had to do like as one of my assignments.
Look, I don't remember all of them. You were doing so many assignments. It'd be like 3 a.m. and we're just working on something. And I'd be trying to help in whatever way I can. So if that was
bring me snacks and water.
Snacks and water. If I had to, whatever I had to do, I was there to help you.
But a genogram is beyond a family tree, right? So a family tree is kind of just like the roots, right? Like Josh and Paulina got together, and then the branches are the different children, and then those branches have branches which are their children, right? But a genogram is different because what you're looking for is relational dynamics, right? So for example, you would indicate going back at least 2 generations, any marriages, any divorces. You could indicate things like any addictions, right? So if I look at my family, there's probably going to be a lot of alcoholism on there, right? A lot of Latinos will probably put a lot of, again, alcoholism on there. You'll put different dynamics that you saw sometimes, cases of abuse and things like that. The interesting thing about genograms, baby, is that when you draw it out and you start seeing it, you start seeing, oh my gosh, like this is repeated over and over again. So for example, say that you, and I'm not going to tell you like the full on symbols, but I do want to encourage our viewers, if you can, go ahead and sit down and write your own name and start working your way up, like mom and dad. And then do mom and dad, and then do your grandparents, and work your way back. And you can also Google kind of what a genogram looks like and kind of work out what yours would look like. But say that you create your own key and you put alcoholism as like a little green dot.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing that green dot like going back and back and back.
That's good.
Right? Or you put marriage. I think in yours, if marriage was indicated by like a pink heart, you would see a lot of those pink hearts. And it makes me think of the family reunion that we went to.
Yeah.
Everybody got their spouse with them for the most part.
One of those things could be like if you see a pattern of divorce and
Yeah.
multiple husbands, multiple wives,
Yep.
like, is that something that you've seen over and over again?
Yep.
Addictions, whatever, like lots of cheating or whatever the case might be.
Right.
Like that helps you to then realize how, like when the doctor comes and asks you, hey, what's your medical history? And then they want to see like, hey man, like there's a common history. Like your grandfather has a bad knee, your dad has a bad knee,
Yep.
and it's the same thing. Let's check that knee and let's make sure that that's good versus
Exactly.
let's just check everything all
Yeah.
at once and just see. It's like, well, there's actually like some patterns here that we can actually go back and look at specifically.
And so it takes me back to the genetic testing as well, because the doctor that I'm seeing, she told me, these aren't necessarily deficiencies in you, but they will become deficiencies if you don't supplement for those things now. Right?
Which is, again, exactly what we're talking about. Let's catch these things early on.
Yeah.
And let's say like you haven't caught it early on and you're down the line and you have been married for a little while. Doesn't mean that you don't have hope.
No.
Because God can actually redeem that and he can actually heal
course.
that and he can actually do those things. But what we're talking about is let's look at what those patterns are. Because even 10 years, 20 years into a marriage, you could still see those same patterns all the way back through all your different family history.
Yeah.
And realize, oh shoot, like there's a pattern here.
Yeah. So I think one that comes to mind for me as well is, and again, we see this in Latin culture, right? Mujeriegos. Just like the Casanovas that are going to get with a bunch of women, and just cheating is such a huge thing. And for you, you may think to yourself, and I know that so many little boys think to themselves when they see their parents. And actually, I saw a reel the other day. I don't know if you'll remember it. And it was like this guy interviewing these boys, like, oh, who would cheat, your mom or your dad?
Oh yeah,
I hated that video.
Saw that. That was really
It broke
sad.
my heart. And a lot of a few of those boys, you could see the distress in their face as they shared my daddy, and I know because he's done it already.
Yeah, and
Right?
it's like a pattern. Like a lot of these same boys, they were probably in the same
Yeah.
neighborhood, most likely, and it was just like a repeated pattern, even from their like where the area that they lived. And it was just,
Yeah.
it was like one after another. They were like, so who would cheat in your family? My dad, my dad, my dad. And it was just down the line, each one of them.
And it may have been edited that way, but again, I want to go back to that question that we kind of started with, which is what were those things that maybe as a little you thought to yourself, I'm not going to do that when I grow up, that perhaps you haven't thought about in a while, that you may just be replicating right now, or even just starting there. What were those things that you said, I won't do that?
Yeah.
And I want to encourage us, and it's work that we have done, and you to go ahead and look at, what are my natural tendencies, right? And by these tendencies, again, we're talking about the automatic thinking. We're talking about those generational curses, those generational patterns that we've learned to do that we don't want to continue to replicate.
That's good. So that video with the boys, I mean, like it's one after another. They're all saying, my dad, my dad, my dad. That's really sad. It's
some of
actually
them
heartbreaking
said-
to watch.
Yeah, and you could see in their face, like, man, it's my mom that's being cheated on. And I'm sure that some of those boys are thinking to themselves, I won't do that when I grow up. I won't do that to my wife when I grow up. And yet, unless we pause to recognize these things, that's exactly where we'll end up, right? I think of, families where the grandfather, again, like I was talking with Latino culture, is like a Casanova. And you see then his sons, and they all end up being that way. And then his sons, and the majority of them end up being that way. And again, as little boys, they probably thought to themselves, I'm not going to do that.
They're not thinking like, I can't wait to go and do these same things that my
Yep.
grandfather or my father has done.
But that's the way that you learn to cope with stress, with pain, with whatever the case is, was go get you a woman to validate you, go. So whatever
Exactly.
that is in your family, we want to encourage you to pause and look at it, because it makes all the difference.
And I think that there could be that little bit of pride that comes in that says, oh, not me. Oh, no, not me. I'm good. Like, I know that my grandfather and my father and all my uncles have done X, Y, Z. I'm good. I'm not going to be that person. And I think that it takes that humility to be able to say,
Yeah.
you know what? Like, I'm not going to declare that this is exactly what I'm going to do.
Right.
But you know what? If they're all doing that, I need to be aware of this and just have that in the forefront.
Yeah.
And then trust the Lord that he's going to renew my mind, completely transform me from the inside out, And sometimes that can happen instantaneously, but sometimes that can happen over time. And I have to be in agreement with his word, and I need to follow in that. And there's times where I have to realize like, hey, my cycle, my automatic thinking is to go down this path. And you know what? I'm not going to do that.
Exactly.
And I need to take that to Jesus and be like, you know what? Like, this is not going to be me anymore.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about what to do with it. But first, we have to recognize what are the cycles at play to begin with, right? And so the reality is that our natural predisposition, if you look at it through neuroscience, our brains crave comfort, right? So we don't want to go and work out. We know that that's the right and the good thing to do, but our brains want us to stay in the couch and to eat because it's going to give us comfort and to watch whatever show, though that's not the best thing for us. And we know that. And so what do we have to do? We have to go against that natural predisposition to get to the thing that we actually want to accomplish.
So it's kind of like what you were talking about with automatic versus manual. Automatic is a lot easier. Manual is more difficult. Simple example is like with cars. An automatic car is so easy to drive because you don't have to shift. You don't have to keep track of the gears and the revs and making sure that when you use the clutch and do this at the same time, it all moves smoothly and well. It's the same thing when it comes to anything in our life, but in this instance about cycles and automatic thinking, our automatic way is to be the easiest way, and we have to try to start going into more of a manual way and start engaging into what we're actually doing and having that input inside of it.
Let's keep the good automatic stuff, right? Like what your mom put in you with the vacuuming, let's keep it. Let's keep that going.
You want to keep that
Shout out to my mom who taught me, like, get fresh fruit every week. Enjoy it. Like,
that's right.
Don't get the Twinkies in the pantry. I appreciate it. But for those automatic processes that are not serving our relationship, it's time to pause and take a good look at them. And so I think that sometimes we don't have the language to have these conversations. But if you are a married couple and you're tuned in, you're watching, I really want to encourage you to take some time this week with your butang and to start thinking through, what's an automatic process? What's some automatic thinking that you see in me that isn't serving our marriage?
That's good.
Right?
And we talk about this and we do this because why? If you are just left up to things just being automatic, and they are always automatic, what's going to tend to happen? You're going to start separating. And it's like what we always talk about, kind of like another foundational point that we really understand in marriage, for our marriage, is that there is no like neutral ground. It always just kind of just stays right there. It's either you're getting closer or you're moving further away. It's kind of like the second law of thermodynamics, like super nerdy, but it's that if unless acted upon, an object or something is going to just continue to deteriorate. Like it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
I was going to ask, what is the second law? So
things go from order to disorder naturally. Like that's just a law.
Yeah.
So even if you would leave a car out in a desert, over time, however much time, it's going to just continue to disintegrate into nothing. Right? It goes from order to disorder.
Right.
The same thing happens with our marriage.
That's so
is
good.
That it'll go from order to disorder. So that automatic thinking doesn't have any input on our side, especially on the negative things that we don't want to keep those cycles going. So it's up to us to really realize, wait a second, we need to do something about this.
Yeah.
Because I don't want it to go from order to disorder. And unless we act upon it, it's going to naturally do that in the automatic.
Yeah. And so that was really good, baby. And I totally agree with you. And I think with that said, something that is so powerful that I don't think we talk about is that we can change. Like, we don't have to stay the same way, right? So, man, I grew up seeing these dynamics. This is how I saw my family communicate. This is how I saw my dad cope. Fill in the blank. Yes, and it doesn't have to stay that way. So again, we're encouraging you this week, pause and take a look at it. Have an honest conversation with your loved one and set the environment where it's like, babe, this is a safe moment. I'm not going to hold this against you, but I want to be the best that I can be for our marriage, for us. What is a blind spot? Start with one, right? And with that, the cool thing is that we don't have to stay how we are, right? So it used to be thought that once personality was developed and behaviors were developed, that's how it was. And yet what we've found is that our brains are actually neuroplastic.
Yeah.
Right? It's what we call neuroplasticity. And what that means is things don't just stay solid as they are. Once something is established, that's it forever, right? Which is those automatic thinking that comes from what we grew up seeing, et cetera, what we've spoken about. What we can do is actually create new neural pathways, right? So we have something ingrained in us. It's a street that we've driven by back and forth. That's the automatic thinking that we're talking about.
Right.
But we can establish a new street to go down, a new bridge instead, right? That leads us to the type of communication, to the type of connection that we want instead. Now, at first, it's very manual.
Yeah.
It's not natural. It goes against our tendency, right? As we've been talking about. But yet we can establish those new neural pathways. And so that's the beginning of why we even pause to recognize these things that aren't serving us, because we can do something about it.
Our minds can develop.
Yes.
And we can change it. We can literally renew our minds.
Yeah, this is biblical.
And that's the cool thing. It's like what the Bible says about being able to renew our minds is a biblical thing.
Yeah, before psychology caught up, Jesus was already telling us in Romans, right? It says, well, Jesus didn't say it, but Paul wrote, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Romans 12:2.
That's amazing.
And psychology didn't recognize that. We couldn't see that. And now we could see brain scans that literally show
we can renew our minds.
We can literally renew our mind, renew our thought processes.
That's incredible.
It's incredible.
And I love it. I love it when the Bible says something and then science catches up to it.
Yeah.
That's always fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such a beautiful thing because again, well, I just think that way.
Yeah.
Oh, I am how I am. Oh, well, there's no hope in me trying to change it now. That's just how I am. All of those are lies from the enemy. That's not true.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this is just how our marriage is going to be.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just how we are. Those are ways that the enemy traps you into these toxic, bad cycles. And there is hope. Yeah. We can have our minds renewed. We can look in and be like, okay, what's going on here? Well, I can't do it unless that person does it first. And we have to both do it at the same time, or else it's no. Just start with yourself. Yep. What are those things in you? And start asking the Lord, what is that in me that I need to start renewing my mind on? Yep. It's not just based upon us to have to do it. The Holy Spirit is here to help us to actually accomplish that in us. And that's a beautiful thing. But we have to agree with it. And it is on us to agree with that, to align ourselves with that and not be against it.
Yeah. So I can look at the genetic testing that I just did. And some of it is and this can lead to fill in the worst possible diagnosis, right? Yeah. And so I can take it and just I guess that's what it's going to be. Or I can accept this as a helpful user manual to get to know Paulina's strengths and also her deficiencies and ways that I can then supplement to be healthy, to live out everything that God has for us, right?
That's right.
In that same way, we can go ahead and recognize, okay, these are the automatic things that have been given to me, that have been passed down to me, that I've taken in, and I don't have to continue to do this if it's not serving us, if it's not serving our family anymore. If it's not serving me, right? If you're in your singleness season, man, you've recognized those things and you can recognize it now so that you don't choose a partner out of the automatic thinking that has clearly not served your family, right? So
That's good.
we're going to keep it real here. We're going to get into the things that matter. And
That's
they're
right.
not always easy. But again, our natural tendency is going to be drift. It's going to be comfort. In our flesh, it's going to be sin.
Yeah.
And yet we're not powerless to those things.
We seek comfort, right? Like we're going to constantly look to try to do things and not to do the work that's needed. And that's going to only lead to drifting away.
Yeah.
There's just a constant pull to just try to drift. There's always that constant pull.
Yep.
And so there isn't such a thing as just, oh, it's in neutral, we're good. Like if that's your mentality, more than likely,
Yep.
it's probably starting to drift away.
Yeah.
And we don't want that. That's the purpose of the Good Love Co. is that we want to help in whatever we can do, bring people together to experience that good love, because we were created for good love.
Yeah.
So we want to help.
Yeah.
And hopefully in this understanding of cycles and automatic thinking and versus manual versus neuroplasticity, it's going to help drive us closer together.
Yeah. And it's terms that we kind of hear and see all the time. As we mentioned, generational curses or cycles, something probably came to mind for you. And so we hope that we were able to add some context to that. And again, if you are engaged or if you are married, hey, what are those kind of tendencies, that automatic thinking that you see in me? If you are married, perhaps asking, hey, how do you feel that I'm drifting away from you? Have that conversation this week.
Be willing to have that conversation.
Yeah, and
be
we
open
hope
to it.
that it is fruitful and that it encourages that good love between you.
And you know what? Even if you are not engaged or not married and you're single and you're actually looking and wanting to get married or you're dating, like you're in the early stages, this is still a good practice. Get ahead of the game. Like start getting ahead of it. Understanding, you know what, this is in my family. These are the types of things that I need to be looking out for. And you're going to only make your life that much easier down the line.
Exactly. So with that said, if you have any questions for us, again, whether you are in that singleness, dating, engagement, or early marriage phase, please drop them in the comments or DM them over to us. We would love to start incorporating a little question segment at the end of our episodes.
I think that would be super fun.
Right? I
would love to be able to just have a bunch of questions that we could start just going over. And if that's helpful, wonderful.
Yeah. So as we start getting those questions in, we'll start compiling them and hopefully we can add that segment soon.
Yeah,
if you
for
are
sure.
still watching, we are so thankful again that you are here. We did create a prayer request link. So if you have any prayers that you'd like for us to be joining you in prayer for, please go ahead and use the link in our description and we would be happy to be praying with you.
That's right.
And lastly, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Like, share,
that part.
subscribe.
Yes.
It's still weird to say it. Like, because it's like you hear it all the time.
I know.
But it's genuinely, it actually does help us.
It really, really does.
And
So
it's
please
wonderful.
do.
So like, share, subscribe,
Yes.
all the good things. We're excited. We're
Yeah.
excited to what's coming and all the different topics that we have.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And we recognize that we're not leaving today with like and here are 3 tips to fix it. And that's okay. Like we're here
That's
for the
okay.
journey. And so again, we encourage you and we hope that this week you do take some moments to just pause and think through, what are these things that aren't serving me, my family, or that I don't want to continue, that I've seen and that may feel natural, but that I don't want to take on to the next generation.
So good. Thank you, Miss
right.
Therapist.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. See y'all next week.
We'll see you all next week.
You're my sky, you're my